is Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a member of both the Senate Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. Good to be with you.
What is your expectation for this foreign aid bill once it reaches the Senate on Tuesday?
Well, as you noted, we're going to take it up this week. I think there's a lot of support for the bill in the Senate. I think it is quite likely to pass in the Senate when it comes over on Tuesday. Look, there are elements of this bill that are good. There are elements of the bill that are not so good. The most important elements of the bill, the best parts of the bill, are, number one, much-needed military aid for Israel. Israel has been at war since October 7th. Israel has been depleting its ammunition. It has been depleting Iron Dome and David Sling and Arrow 2 and 3, which are the missile defense systems that it has that have saved countless lives. And so I think it is important that we provide that Israel military aid. The Democrats have delayed that 7 months now. I think it's important that that be in there. There's also very important in this bill is the TikTok prohibition. That is major legislation. You and I have talked before about TikTok. I have deep concerns about TikTok controlled by the Chinese Communist government. I think the Chinese Communist government can, number one, use that for surveillance and espionage of American citizens. And number two, they use it right now aggressively to push propaganda, anti-America propaganda to our young people. This bill's a major step forward in that it forces China to divest of TikTok. Both of those are good. I think the most disappointing part of this bill is that it does not do anything meaningful to secure the border. This was an opportunity to take a serious step forward on the border, and unfortunately the Democrat Party's position is they support open borders. They're unwilling to do anything on border security. As for the Ukraine funding, I think this got more focus than the Democrat bill. The Ukraine funding, of the $48 billion, roughly $35 billion of it is directed to the U.S. military. I think that is a good thing.
Good point. Yeah.
And a portion of it is also structured as a loan. That is a good thing. I wish this were directed at only military aid and not economic aid. Unfortunately, there's about $10 billion of economic aid as a forgivable loan. I'm not a fan of that, but I am a fan of, as I said, the Israel and TikTok portions of the bill.
Well, I want to ask you about two things there, and you're right. I mean, Joe Biden could just forgive the loan, so it's a loan, but it's a forgivable loan. But even Brandon Judd, the head of the Border Patrol Union, was so disappointed in this because there was absolutely no help for the border. I mean, couldn't the lawmakers have actually just forced a change, a new security at the border? Not even any money. Brandon Judd says this. There's nothing more backwards. I wouldn't have even expected taxpayer dollars. They could have given us policy, and that would have been enough. No policy changes at the border. Why are you having such a hard time moving the needle on security at the border, Senator? You meaning Republicans? Well,
listen, the Democrat Party embraces open borders. They want this invasion. And Republicans, listen, I feel for Speaker Mike Johnson. He has a virtually impossible job. He's down now to a one-vote majority. That majority goes all over the place on everything. And so he's a good man who is trying mightily. But at least so far, Republicans have not been willing or able to use the leverage we have to force real border security. I'll tell you, Maria, this week was a bad week for the United States Constitution. This week, we had the Alejandro Mayorkas trial that was supposed to happen this week, and Senate Democrats, every Democrat refused to hold a trial and essentially nuked the impeachment provisions of the Constitution. And also this week, we saw both the House and the Senate refuse to enforce the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement for searches of American citizens on FISA. And I think both of those in the same week is really a bad week for the Constitution.
Well, and not to mention this two-tiered system of justice. You've got opening statements in this so-called hush money trial tomorrow for President Trump. And I should point out that we've got breaking news from Tony Bobulinski. He is actually filing suit against your colleague in the House, Representative Jamie Raskin. Tony Bobulinski says Jamie Raskin has repeatedly lied about the plaintiff, Tony Bobulinski, implying and directly stating that Bobulinski has lied to Congress and is a Trump campaign plant. So you've got all of this sideshow going on as President Trump has to face down on all of these indictments, opening statements beginning tomorrow, while you've got potential corruption in plain sight and no focus on U.S. citizens at seeing what's happening to the country with the open border.
Well, and Maria, there's a unifying thread through all of this, and it is that Democrats are willing to abuse power and defy the law in order to stay in power, that their number one concern that trumps everything else is keeping Democrats in control. People ask me all the time, why would they allow? We're now up to 11 million illegal immigrants under Joe Biden,
wow.
The worst in history. Why would they allow this invasion? And the answer is simple. They view those 11 million illegal immigrants as future Democrat voters. They want to stay in power. On the impeachment trial, why would they utterly ignore the text of the Constitution and 200 years of precedent? Because they desperately did not want the facts of this invasion at our southern border before the American people. They did not want the American people to see the people who are dying, the women who are being sexually assaulted, the children who are being abused and being murdered, the drug overdoses, the crimes, the risks of terror. They're terrified of those facts, and so they just defy their constitutional obligation to hold an impeachment trial. The same is true with the two-tier system of justice. The Democrats, the Biden Justice Department, and Democrat prosecutors across the country are more than happy to abuse the justice system to try to destroy their opposition. And the thread behind all of that is for the Democrats staying in power is all that matter. The rule of law and the Constitution for them, sadly, is no longer a concern.
Well, that is incredibly disappointing. We should point out that the census just counts people. It doesn't count citizens. So it does help the Democrats to have a wide open border, doesn't it? Because if you've got more people in sanctuary cities, you'll get more congressional seats. So that's what we're hearing as far as the impact on the census.
Yeah, and actually, we teed up a vote on that, a vote directly that said the census should not count illegal aliens.
Right.
In the Senate, the Democrats voted party line against that vote. In the House, my opponent in November is a very, very liberal congressman from Dallas. He voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi his first 4 years in office, this guy named Colin Allred, and he voted in favor of counting illegal aliens in the census. He also voted against deporting illegal aliens who criminally assault police officers. That's the position of Democrats. And by the way, in the Senate, we had that vote. Every Democrat said an illegal alien who physically assaults a police officer, do not deport him. Every Democrat voted no. They're radicalized. Maria, I tell you, in every state in the union, if you gather just ordinary people together and asked, in New York, in California, anywhere, said, look, if an illegal alien assaults a cop, should you deport him? Normal people are going to say, of course you should. Of course. But not elected Democrats. Elected Democrats, they side with the criminals and the illegal aliens against American citizens.
Senator, what can you do as an elected official to stop this anti-Semitism raging throughout the country? I mean, look what happened this week. Anti-Israel campus protests intensifying at Columbia University. 100 students detained, many arrested at Columbia University last week as the protesters sprung up at universities across the country. Why are we seeing this once again?
Well, look, we're seeing a vicious anti-Semitism, a vicious hatred of Israel in our universities and, sadly, among the Democrat Party. I'll tell you, Maria, one of the most troubling things about the Democrat Party, and these two are intertwined, it's not just the squad. It's not just the extremes of the Rashida Tlaibs and the Omars and the AOCs. It's the so-called mainstream of the Democrat Party. It was Chuck Schumer who stood on the Senate floor and demanded that the elected leader of Israel be thrown out of office. That's never happened in the history of the Senate before. It was Joe Biden who orchestrated a resolution at the UN effectively condemning Israel for not having an immediate ceasefire. It was Nancy Pelosi who signed a letter saying cut off military funds to Israel. Now, Biden and Schumer and Pelosi are not the fringe of the Democrat Party. They are the leadership. They are the so-called mainstream of this party. This party has turned hard anti-Israel because they're terrified of their rabid core. And on campus, you see really the id of the Democrat Party expressed. And you want to know why this is happening? This, tragically, is cultural Marxism. That our universities are indoctrinating young people. Cultural Marxism breaks the world into oppressors and victims. And they have defined Jews as oppressors. They have defined Palestinians as victims. And so for the cultural Marxists, once they make that definition,
Yeah.
They support the violent revolution of the so-called victim against the so-called oppressor. And this is the leftist ideology of our universities and the Democrat Party. Sadly, it's a really ugly manifestation we're seeing on the streets of New York and across the country in universities.
Well, it sure is. And I would argue that it originates in communist China, and they're taking that up. Senator, you've written about this quite eloquently in the past. I know that in your book a few books ago. Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Senator Ted Cruz.